Hello. The lighting is kind of harsh right now. I noticed that. I just noticed that. Let's figure this. I'm going to do this episode like this today. I hope that's not weird. I'm going to be controlling the mouse with my mind. Episode 3. We're going to be talking about illustration. We're going to be doing an illustration. We're going to show you how to do some texturing, how to do bitmap tiffs, how to make shit look like you didn't do it on the computer. So let's get into it now. So in this video, we're going to be creating this illustration. Today I'm working on this. This is Martin Luther King Day. I'm the only one in the office because no one told me we had the day off. No, actually, I had a client that scheduled a meeting. So this is an illustration I just kind of did on the fly. And I'm going to show you how I did it. We're going to do textures. I'm going to show you how to make it look, do this in Illustrator, but make it look rough and textured and a bunch of my tricks that I do. Let's get into it, okay? copy this layer because what if I want to go back to it? Let's delete that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything with this dot pattern. Select same fill color. I'll lock it up just because I don't want to mess with it. I'm going to select all. I'm going to expand it. So what that means is all my line work is now going to be shapes. Okay, that's important for this step. Now I'm going to select everything, and then I'm going to Effect, Distort, Transform, Roughen. Okay, now when you're using the Roughen feature, what I want you to do is I want you to always use turn on absolute first. Okay, and then I use smooth, whatever, preview. So you can see that it's like roughening all the edges, but the details, it's way too big. So it says 0.007. Let's go to make it at 0.02, and let's up the detail to like 64, whatever. Now let's see what that looks like. So you can see it here. This is, to me, this is interesting, but probably too rough. So let's go back into the roughen. Let's go 1, right? Because I think my scale right now is this is like on an 8.5 by 11. It's probably only like a 7 by 7 illustration or something like that. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I like that. I like how that looks. That looks a little more natural of a line. I'm into that. I'm with it. I'm hip. I'm cool. Okay, so I can also do that to the outline of the dotted pattern. So select same fill color, apply roughen. Okay, so that didn't affect the dots themselves, just the sort of the outline of the dots. Okay, step number 1. Step number 2, let's introduce some halftone bitmap tiffs to this thing. What the hell is a halftone bitmap tiff? Well, something you make in Photoshop that you place into for a spot color. So let's check it out. Let's just go into. I have a library of these things that we've been using forever, so I'm just going to place one, but then I'll go in and I'll show you how to make one and stuff. So in our drive, come on, motherfucker. Art files, we have something called textures and clip art. This is sort of like if we make a TIFF, we'll put it in here. So let's put this brayer one in here. This is kind of a cool, not bad TIFF. Nice textures. Maybe we'll use that. Let's see here. Large patch. Photocopy texture. So I'm just looking through these things. Yeah, let's put this one in here. See what that does. Oops. Did I open it, not place it? Whatever. Copy it from there. Place it. Shrink it down. Tiny. Place. Let's do one more. Place. Wood shapes. What is that? Rolled ink textures. I think that's what I want. Yeah, let's use these. I like these the best. Okay. I think I'll use these, not this. Maybe this later. So let's look at these things. So we got 4 different TIFFs. TIFFs are cool because they're used great with spot color. So I can apply any color I want to them and an effect, right? So here's me applying the colors to them. And what's great about it is it's not vector, it's Photoshop, and it's not going to bog down your system, right? I just have a couple of points for using them. When you're using them, try to use them all about the same size or the same angle, because you don't want one giant texture, one tiny texture. It just doesn't make sense. So I want to make these a little bit bigger, actually. Okay, so for instance, let's let's put this texture onto this orange layer. So I'm going to turn it orange. I'm going to take it, I'm going to Command 7 it, which is making a mask. So sometimes you get repeating stuff like this, and you're like, oh, let's try to hide that somehow. So I always recommend trying to hide that up. So sometimes when you apply the mask, it will take away the roughen. So just click that again and then add the roughen. So between the tiff and the roughen, it's looking pretty organic and interesting. So let's sort of just add. Let's use this one. You know, maybe better to maybe combine a couple together. So at this point, you know what I could actually do. Oops, what did I just do there? What if I select, for fun, if I select same fill color, all right, selecting all the green, I'm going to Command 8 it, which makes a compound mask. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a texture on there, and let's put one of these textures too. Don't send that to back. Send that to back. So let's select all three of these things, right? So the two textures and the compound mask, and then I'll press Command 7. Let's send that to back. And then let's copy this shit around. And you can get some cool happy accidents with this shit. I'm just moving things around here. Flip this. It's like two. Oh, okay. I see what was happening. Just playing around. I do like. Oops. Now, once again, I got to go back in there and add my roughen effect to it. But let's kind of look in here. You can sort of see where they overlay. It's kind of cool looking, right? That's neat. That's neat. What if I take this? You know what? Let's do it to the black layer too, the navy layer. So select same fill color. I'm not going to worry about the halftone stuff. So let's Command 8 it. Oops, they're in different groups. What different groups? Let's ungroup this shit. Select same fill color. Command 8. What is in a different group? I'm not figuring this out. Oh, these things. Got it. Okay, now let's try it again. And lock those. Select same fill color. Command 8. There we go. That worked. You son of a bitch. So let's go with a darker one, something that has a little less texture because I want this to sit on top. So let's use this. Send it to back. Let's select this, Command 7, right? So you get some cool stuff like that. Like that's kind of neat. Sort of imply applies a light source. Now once again, I need to go in and add my roughen to it. Right. So let's see what we got here. So that's pretty cool. Just using some tiffs and the roughen technique. Oh, look at that. That little booger got away. Let's add a texture to his lips. Now what if we use this this texture? Kind of makes it dirty all over, right? Kind of cool. Now let's mask everything off in a square, you know, for Instagram. Let's just get rid of these just to clean up. I'm going to select everything, Command 7, right? So I've masked it all off now. And there we go. That's probably a little too much texture, but whatever. You get the vibe, man. So that's interesting. There you go. So one other thing I like to do, if this is printing digitally or if it's just for the web, a lot of times what I will do, a little trick I'd like to do. This is a little trick I like to do. Oops. I'm just selecting that square shape. Just do like a sort of a yellow overlay on everything. Kind of will warm everything up, right? It's very subtle, but it's almost like printing on natural paper. So just setting a layer on top. See the difference there? Just setting a layer on top that's very light yellow, and hitting multiply on it. Boom, there we go. Bing, bang, boom. That's pretty cool. So I did the roughen, the halftones, the tiffs. How do you make a tiff, Bill? Oh, good question, dude. Let's save this so my shit don't crash. MLK illustration, bro. Save it to my desktop, son. Okay, so tiffs. What the fuck is a tiff? To do this, you're going to need to go into Photoshop. Let's create new. So whenever you're doing some tiffs, you got to be conscious of size, right? How big are you going to use this? How big are you working at? You know, if it's for print, we're talking 300 dpi at least at 100% of final print size. So make sure you're working at the proper size. Let's do 10 by 10 at 300 dpi grayscale. Okay, so you know, actually, before we do this, let's go through a couple of different types of tiffs that I have that I've used before. So you saw some of those rolled ink textures. Let's see. Here's sort of like a halftone. This is like a nice organic halftone texture. This is just like a very simple line, textured line, really textured line. vertical line texture. So here's one that is, it's a pretty big one. You can see that it's a vertical line halftone that has texture in it. So if I zoom in, you can see all the sort of texture in there. Let's see some in action. How about that? Not gonna worry about the typeface. Okay, so this is a screen printed poster that we designed years ago. 3 colors: the 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 red and the gold color mix to create this darker color. But all of these lines, right? This is a TIFF placed over and over and over and over, right? And then put into mask. So so if I go into outline mode, you can see them all. There's like hundreds of them. Even though there's hundreds of them, it's not bogging my system down. So that's another good reason to use TIFFs. So let's kind of go in here and check this out. So this is just like one of those line halftones. Make sure this shit is not right. So if I take this and I copy it, I'm going to paste it into a new artboard. Right. So this is what the halftone looks like. The bitmap. Sorry. It's a different. It's another line halftone that has texture in it. Right. Pretty simple. It's just a way for me to go to get a gradation, a gradient. Right? I can change it to whatever color I want. I think the most important note about this, using this TIFF, is I made sure I didn't shrink it or enlarge it in the illustration. It's always the same size everywhere, and it's always at the same like 45-degree angle or whatever that is, right? So that there's a consistency, within the illustration. Because if they're all going everywhere, it probably wouldn't work as well. So there's a good example of how they're used. Let's try to find another example. How about this Coltrane poster? Maybe this has TIFFs. Can't remember. Okay, so this is a poster that's really similar to that Martin Luther King poster, right? So I'm using a Roughen on a lot of the line work, and then I'm filling the spaces in with TIFFs. A lot of this line work are also TIFFs, right? So this is just a line that, with TIFFs, you can stretch them and pull them and stuff like that, to some degree. So let's see here. So for instance, here's one shape that has some TIFFs in it, right? So let's look at what these TIFFs are. I'm going to delete the mask. Oh, it's actually not a TIFF. I made a vector out of a TIFF. That's for next week's class. Copy and paste it. So here's what that TIFF is inside of his face, right? And they're sort of combined and mixed and the whole schlemiel, but used everywhere, right? There's one in this Supreme thing. I like working this way because I don't love Photoshop. 1, 2. It just allows me better editing. It might be slower as you're building, but I like the editability process through the whole thing. So there's an example. Let's do one more. Let's do a Mondo poster. How about that? Oh, you know what would be a good example? My Fight Club poster. So you can see all the placed images. Now, when you're using, it's only a couple. When you're using placed images, you have to keep those files somewhere because it's going to want to pull them into your folder, into your file, right? Unless you embed them, because you can embed them, obviously. Okay, so this was the Fight Club poster for Mondo from years ago. And this illustration um, similarly was built like that other one. I didn't put any texture on the line work this time, but I did use a bunch of TIFFs. So let's get rid of the paper overlay color. Let's just kind of deal with the black artwork, right? So all of these things, let's look at the preview mode again. That outline mode. So you can see all these TIFFs, bing, bang, boom, everywhere. That's technical term, bing, bang, boom. And it's just using them as sort of shapes to build up the illustration. So sometimes it's just a vector pattern, but let's just pull some of these out of here. Right, so this is just the shape that the TIFF is in. So let's copy, new, paste it. So if I get rid of this, not that, this, you can see this is just what the TIFF looks like. It's, I scanned in a bunch of images from an old antique architectural magazine and made TIFFs out of all of them because it was like cool, angular, and then I wanted to also reference the end of the movie where it had the buildings blowing up and falling down and stuff. So that's sort of what the concept, but the idea was. So it's just like a bunch of this shit just layered on top of each other, right? This is like an architectural drawing. It's just ways to create interesting textures and whatnot. Um, so they really can be. They really have all kinds of uses and can be used in all kinds of ways. So let's open up one more from the Mondo files. Let's see here. Let's do film. Okay, so here's a poster that's using a bunch of bitmap TIFFs, textures, line work, vector bullshit. Okay, so I'm going to turn off everything off except the black layer, right? So this, once again, I'm going to copy, new. Come on, motherfucker. Paste it, right? So this is the TIFF, right? It's in this mask. What's cool about this is, I can, as I'm working, I can move it around in that mask. I can edit the mask as well, right? Um, so it's just used, so when I'm using this TIFF, the idea is I want to make sure that I'm using it at the same scale every time, right? So that it looks like I used the same paper and pencil and everything to make these to make this line work or to make the texture. So once again, we'll look at it as outline mode. You can sort of see all of the TIFFs. There you go. Okay, so let's make one. Let's make one that kind of like we just saw there. Okay, so what the one that we just saw there, it was a gradient, right? It went from black to nothing, dark to nothing. A lot like my life. So let's just make a gradient here. Just trying to get a good gradient. You can see I'm failing miserably here. Okay, so if I have something just like this, gradient, no texture, no anything, and now keep in mind you got to be in grayscale. Be in grayscale. I can turn this into a bitmap, right? there's basically two main ways you're going to be able to do it: 50% threshold and halftone screen. Let's talk about the halftone screen right now. If I just, so it's 300 dpi, make sure the output is 300 dpi. Frequency just means how big or how small the dots are going to be, how much pattern is, how small your patterns are going to be. The angle is the angle that the dots or the lines are going to lay at. Right now it's at 0. Let's put it at 45. And let's make it round, right? So if I do something like this, you can see that, here we go. We got a halftone pattern. I could save this out as a TIFF, and I could use it. But there's no real texture into that, right? So how do I introduce texture? Well, you could go out and take a photograph of some concrete or some brick or whatever you want it to do, right? So for lack of an example, let's just look up concrete texture. Images, tools, size, large. I apologize to whoever made these. I'm going to be stealing them. Whatever. I'm not sure which will work the best here. Let's try this. I'm doing this on the fly, so I don't know exactly. We're going to see what the results are going to be here. I'm just going to increase this. Unite it. I'm going to set it to multiply, right? So now I've introduced a texture into it, into the gradient, right? So now if I try to go into bitmap, let's do the same thing. 300 dpi, halftone screen, 24 frequency, angle 45, round. Okay, now I've got something a little more interesting here, right? Now I've got a little more of a gradient, but the problem here is now it goes from black, near black, to gray, right? It doesn't totally wash away. So let's go back a step and try it again. I knew that was going to happen. I'm just using it as a learning tool, in case you think I'm an idiot. So I just need to create a new layer. I need to kind of go white. Let's just paint it on. Why not? I think I want to paint on some more black too, because I want it to go a little more black on this end. Okay, so this could be a little harsh, but we'll try it, right? So let's do that again. Let's go bitmap 300 dpi, halftone screen, 24 frequency, angle 45, shape round. Boom. Okay, so now I've got something that's a real gradation. So let's zoom in and sort of check it out, right? So now that can be saved out as a TIFF and then placed into things. So let's experiment with different types of bitmap TIFFs here. Let's do bitmap. Everything the same, except now this time I'm going to do line, right? Boom. So that's what that looks like. So now instead of dots, now it's giving me lines. Let's undo that. Let's do it again. Now those are done at a 45-degree angle. Let's do them at 0, so it's going to be straight across. Boom. Right? That looks pretty good. Now you can see that that was exactly like the thing that I used in that eagle illustration, right? But wait, there's more. Let's look at 50% threshold. This one's interesting as well. It might give us some interesting results. That's pretty cool. That's interesting, right? So what's important about a TIFF is there's no, if I zoom in, no gray pixels, right? It's either black or white. Why is that helpful? Because that allows us to apply spot color to them, which means we can fucking screen print it. Now, if we go to adjust threshold, actually, you got to flatten this first. I'm going to flatten it. Image adjust threshold. Threshold does exactly what the 50% bitmap TIFF does, right? Except it gives me a slider, so I can sort of select my output, and I can find sort of the best texture that I want, right? And then once that is done, I can go into bitmap 50% threshold, and it's unchanged, really, basically. Let's go back. So let's change this texture. I'm going to rotate it. Let's rotate it 90 degrees and see what it does have a little weird line in there, which I don't like. So I'm just going to move it. So let's try the exact same thing, but now I've changed it. Let's see what kind of different properties it gives us, right? So now that you can see that texture's been applied. Oops. Let's zoom in here. Right? So it all depends. That's actually a pretty cool texture. I might save that one for myself. Now, but let's try to do it with the halftone again. So halftone screen. The diffusion dither, the pattern dither, custom pattern. Play with the diffusion. The diffusion is good, but these are mostly the two you're gonna use. Let's leave that. Let's do it. Go back to the round 45. Not really that much difference than that. Okay, so, but wait, there's more. There's also a cool way to get some more organic stuff. If you go in, so it's flattened, it's grayscale. Go into Filter Gallery. Go to the stamp, right? So the stamp can give you some cool shit too. You can see the watermarks showing up there. Don't use watermarks in your artwork. That's bad. You know, you can easily go with your iPhone and select your own, create your own textures. So sort of all depending on how good your texture, the texture file that you bring in, you know, the thing that I found, maybe I need something a little more detailed, maybe I need something more speckled, that kind of thing. It would all change the effects that you're going to get with your TIFF. So once I have something like this, then I can save it as my bitmap, right, at 50% threshold. Okay, let's go back a couple, and let's image mode, bitmap, halftone screen. Let's drop the frequency down, so the dots are going to be bigger, right? So now I got something like this, which is interesting. So let's save as. So let's call it big dots, whatever. Save it to my desktop. So make sure you're saving it as a TIFF, as a TIFF, as a TIFF. All this image compression stuff, I don't touch it. I don't mess with it, man. I don't mess with that, man. So now let's place that one. See if it floats. Big dots. What the fuck? There it is. I mean, I probably won't add this to my final illustration or anything, but it's sort of interesting. See, I can go in and edit it. The mask still. Right. Now I've added, I can move it around. I can scale it. You can always go smaller with them. You can go bigger with it too. Just not that big. Right? There you go. Bing, bang, boom. So I hope that was helpful. Sort of interesting going that way. I'm gonna delete that off of there though because I don't really like it. But there you go, adding textures to illustrations, making cool shit like that. You know, now that I look at this, I want to add one last. Kind of want to add a thing up there, and I can do that since I'm in this program. There you go. So I hope that was helpful. I hope I blew your mind. Hopefully I gave you stuff to work with, gave you some secrets. I think in the next, tell me what you want to see in the next video, but I've got some ideas that are coming down the pipes.